Welcome, Who Dat Nation, to the spooky, scary edition of the Who Dat Confessional podcast, where we're going to be talking about the New Orleans Saints here on Halloween night. It is October 31st. Welcome in, welcome in. I was fiddling with something and I dropped it. Anyway, we've been going through the film room. Film room was a little bit late this week. The guy that gives me my copy from inside the league, well, apparently they had ISP issues. But I did get out a film study today. If you haven't watched it, I strongly encourage you to. If you want to learn about basic post route patterns, if you want to learn about some different concepts, check out today's film study on the Saints film room. We go through in depth just a few plays. And I'll be honest, it was probably my favorite film study to have done the past couple of weeks, because instead of taking, like 10 plays and trying to break them all down, we really just kind of take down, hey, here's what this was, why it worked, and went into detail. And I really enjoyed it. But of course, I want to get y'all's thoughts on what you thought about it. So if you haven't already, check out the Saints film room. If you're here watching live, follow it after the podcast. If you are listening to after the fact, well, then watch it after the fact. Let's get some Who Dat. Those who are here already: Brian W. the second, good to see you. Mr. Jarrett D. Hardy, Rainey, Chemo Slice, Creole King, Joseph Feltwell, Gundam Can Be, Hamilton Buchanan, Brett Hirata, Mr. Wright. Who Dat, everybody, welcome on into your favorite New Orleans Saints podcast. And if I'm not your favorite, well, that's okay, because we actually live in a great time where there are a lot of really good Saints podcasts out there. And I remember a time where there was basically none. So it's a good time to be a Saints fan, and it's a good time to be alive. And if you're not feeling alive right now, well, that's a little wild, because I feel perfectly alive. I feel invigorated. In fact, it's probably the chocolate I stole from my children. But I hope they are having a fantastic night. It's always good to see every single one of you. So let's start with what didn't happen. The New Orleans Saints made no moves on the trade deadline, and we got to see multiple players traded, including ones that I had on my list. I talked about on the Bleacher Report app. I didn't think that the New Orleans Saints were going to make a move, but if they were, guys like Montez Sweat, guys like Chase Young, Donnell Hunter, even Carl Lawson, etc. There were names available to be traded. The top two for me were the ones out of the Washington Commanders roster. Now, the Washington Commanders ended up getting a second for Sweat and a third for Chase Young. While New Orleans does not have a third, I do feel like they could have made some package deals and made something happen. But they chose to sit where they are and see where things take us, I guess. Again, I'm not trying to be too harsh. We are still talking about a team that wins, at least the last game. And we are talking about a team that is moving and trending in the right direction. What I mean by that is, oh God, be very careful how we preface this, because I do think the defense has to get better. Defense has kind of gone in a negative direction, but the offense has definitely improved over the past 3 weeks. Now, they haven't won all their games, but the New Orleans Saints offense is currently ranked 12th in the NFL in yards, 17th in points. That's definitely an improvement, where the defense ranks 5th in yards allowed and 9th in points allowed. So it's definitely nothing to shake a stick at either way. But more importantly, look at how the games have actually gone out over the past 3 games. Yes, you've lost 2 of the last 3, but you've thrown for over 300 yards 3 straight times. That's the first time a Saints quarterback has done that in years. It's not about to hype up a Derek Carr video, simply pointing out you've actually had that forward progression. But what about running the football? Actually, that is pretty big too. Over the past 4 games, your New Orleans Saints have run for a total of about 500 yards. They are consistently running the ball effectively where they didn't. So, for example, over the past 4 games, the New Orleans Saints are averaging over 100 yards per game. In the first 4 games, they were averaging about 85, and that's because they had a win against Carolina where they rushed for 134. Against Tennessee, 69. Green Bay, 77. Tampa, 70. Past 4 games, past 3 games especially, the offense has taken a tick up. Now, again, we're talking about wanting this offense to get to a level that we would probably identify as mediocre, right? I'm not trying to argue that this offense is secretly becoming world beaters, but we have seen improvement as long as the defense could stay stout. Now, I will say that I do personally have concerns. I have concerns on the offensive line. I didn't feel like there was a realistic option out there, and I was actually proven wrong, because a very good guard got traded for a 3rd-round pick today. But my concern is really along the defensive line. I do believe that even without the pass rush being elite, hear me out, I do believe without the pass rush being elite, the New Orleans Saints defense is still good enough to get this team to the playoffs. But if they wanted to take the defense to another level, and it is, I do think that's important, they needed to add something to the pass rush. Carl Granderson leads your team with 5.5 sacks. Now, if you're curious who has the second amount of pressures, it's actually Cameron Jordan. Even though he only has 1 sack, he is second the team in pressures. So Cameron Jordan is certainly having an impact, just not the impact that he used to have. But you don't have that extra oomph to it. And right now, the New Orleans Saints, through 8 games, have 15 sacks. That's literally, I mean, I'm not a mathematician. That's literally less than 2 sacks a game. You're not going to win a lot of football games like that. We're talking about a team that historically has been getting 40 to 60 sacks, or 40 to 55-ish sacks a season for several years in a row, and that's with Cameron Jordan getting chipped. So it's not like Cameron Jordan getting double teams now and stuff is something new. That's actually always happened. But right now, the New Orleans Saints are in a slump when it comes to pass rush, which is why I looked at guys like Chase Young and Montez Sweat and Carl Lawson and Derek Barnett for the Eagles, and honestly, whoever I could find, because you needed something. Gerald, good to see you, by the way. Who dat to you? Glad you came in. Also, Dr. Billy Oshie, hope you checked out that Anders Pete film that we put out on Twitter, because I just know that you would absolutely love it. But Billy says, a guy with 1 sack is our sack leader. He is our pressure leader. So pressures are a combination of quarterback hurries, quarterback knockdowns, and who has the most total in between those and pressures. And your number 2, yes, it's Cameron Jordan. Believe it or not, he's number 2. Now, what that means is, think of it kind of like the whole Benjamin Button thing. You become who you are at the very beginning, or however that story goes. He's basically the king of the almost sack again. If you go and watch the Indianapolis Colts film study, one thing that the Colts did with Gardner Minshew, get the ball out very quickly. So there wasn't a lot of pass rush opportunities, which is why you didn't see more until the second half. But even then, Cameron Jordan is the best behind Carl Granderson at getting pressure on the quarterback. He's just not converting it into quarterback. Now, after him, you have Nate Shepard, who has 7 pressure, Demario Davis, who has 7, and Brian Brzee, the rookie, who has 7. So your interior 3 techs are both doing, I would say pretty well. Between the 2 3 techs, you've got 3.5 sacks. That's pretty solid through 8 games. But again, we're talking about this team being solid. Like, the defensive line is solid. It's just not great. And I think that's kind of more of the issue that I'm trying to bring up is this defensive line is not bad. And I don't want to say that it's bad, but it's also not playing at a high level either. And I would say of the entire defensive unit, the most mid is definitely the defensive line. And you've got to, or at least I thought you would hope, you have some level of adjustment there. So we'll see if they can kind of rebound. Because one thing that, speaking of Cameron Jordan, he has a real weird habit of lately. Look, over the past few seasons, what's he done? His sacks have started coming in the second half of the season. Give you an example. Look at 2022, right? 2022, he had a 3-sack game, 2 games before it ended, right? Let's go before that. Let's go to 2021. In 2021, Cameron Jordan, through the first 8 games, had 3 sacks. 3. Now, technically, he has 2 this year, but it only registers as 1 because they're both half sacks. And half sacks are a real stupid stat. I've said it before. There's one thing I agree with Pro Football Focus is that half stat is a stupid stat. So coming into 2021, through 8 games, he had 3 sacks. And then he would actually, in the final 4 games of 2021, he ended with 8 sacks. 8.5, actually. 8.5 sacks in the final 4 games. So clutch time, 2021, end of it, he turns it up. Last year, he had a 3-sack game against Philly, which obviously was a really big deal for the New Orleans Saints. So there's nothing to say that he can't turn it on in the end again, because if you go back even back to 2019, first, 4 games, he had 3 sacks, but you look at him having a 4-sack game against Atlanta. So these things happen with him. He can go into spurt mode, but I think consistency is probably the biggest issue of why I want him to get a Young or a Sweat or a Lawson or a Hunter or somebody, while Peyton Turner comes back in week 13-ish. Still got about 5 weeks before you expect Peyton Turner back, and Foskey simply hasn't become the guy yet, but maybe. Now, we'll say it also depends on who you use for your charting and your metrics. Pro Football Focus still says that Chris Olave hasn't dropped a pass. SIS says that Isaiah Foskey has not recorded a pressure, even though he clearly recorded a pressure on the incomplete pass against Indianapolis. So charting is such a subjective thing because you never know who's behind the charting, right? So I just simply try to use the same source every time. But like right now, if you went by the source that I'm using for Carl Granderson and Cameron George pressure rates, Isaiah Foskey has 0. None in the entire season. Yet he clearly had one against the Colts. And even Dennis Allen remarked on that. So again, when we use analytics, please take it with a grain of salt. And I love what Kurt Warner said. Kurt Warner says that he actually said this past week on Twitter that stats should never build the narrative. They should support the narrative. And I love that because I don't think that Foskey has done absolutely nothing in terms of development, which is exactly what his stat line would say. But he's certainly not where you want him to be either. So we'll just see how it continues to progress and grow. But I do think that it's my opinion that the New Orleans Saints should have made a move today at the deadline to pick up some extra defensive end help. I think that would have made them a better team. Does that make them a bad team for not doing it? I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to sound like I feel like the world is falling when it comes to the Saints defense. But I am saying that this team, whether we agree or not, I agree with it, but I know I run into a lot of fans who don't. The New Orleans Saints believe they're a playoff team, like 100%, no doubt in their mind, they are a playoff team. And if that's your MO, then you should trade assets and you should make moves to make that happen. T-Dirty, who dat? Good to see you, baby. That's kind of my only comment on it, really. I'm not saying that I think the Saints are, falling apart. I just think that defensively, if there is an issue that they can improve on, it has to be pass rush, where it's weird because, again, everything is so subjective, right? Because I hate to really call out the people who've been paying me, but there was an article in Bleacher Report. Shout out Bleacher Report. I really do appreciate them giving me an opportunity to work with them this year. Shout out Bleacher Report. But there was an article in Bleacher Report about trades and who should you trade for. And they actually said that the New Orleans Saints should trade for a corner for opposite Marshawn Lattimore. And let me tell you the disrespect that throws on Paulson Adebo. I did put out some tape on him on Twitter and in the Discord today. If you checked it out, I hope you've enjoyed it. I probably am actually going to do a Paulson Adebo film study if I can get time, work on that tomorrow, and then we'll launch it probably tomorrow or Thursday so that y'all have another Saints Film Room piece. If y'all want Saints Film Room, though, if you listen to this, I need you to do me a huge, huge favor. Shoot this out. This podcast and the Saints Film Room, we need to get some new eyes on it. The more people that share it, and if y'all get to 100 comments, we're already at like 65. Get to 100 comments on that Rashid Shaheed video, we're going to give you that Paulson Adebo video. So there's your incentive there. But Paulson Adebo, we're going to give him a statistical shout out right now. Paulson Adebo has been targeted 35 times in 6 games. He's only allowing a 51% completion percentage, 45.3 QB rating when targeted, and he leads the team with 2 interceptions. Now, I would argue that I want those interception numbers to go up, but leads the team there. If you're curious where Marshawn Lattimore is in 8 games as a starter, Lattimore is allowing 56% of his passes to be completed for a 73 QB rating, which is still really, really good. That's nothing to shake the proverbial stick at. That's very, very good. So both of those are doing really well. And now it's just trying to track and watch, does this offense get better? I mean, and hell, Derek Carr is finally, you finally had a game with Derek Carr that made you go, hey, Derek Carr finally looks decent. Like it actually happened. Now, this is with the New Orleans Saints pass protection not being great, but slowly getting better, right? There are definitely some missed opportunities because of some missed pass rushing opportunities, and I hope that gets cleared up. But he's currently being pressured right now. 15.7% of his dropbacks are pressured. That's the New Orleans Saints quarterback, Derek Carr. If y'all would like, anybody in chat, shout out a quarterback, and I'll tell you what their pressure rate is using the same analytical tool so that y'all can have perspective. I'm going to let chat determine what it is. Gundam says Adebo is a solid tier 1 quarterback or corner playing awesome this year. I agree he's playing great, and I'm really happy for him. Billy says, I was on Adebo last year, but this year he's showing up and not saying his name is great. I agree. All right, Justin Herbert, first one that comes up in the screen. So let's take a look at Justin Herbert's pressure rate so far in 2023 using SIS's advanced analytics. Here's what they say. His pressure rate is 16.1%. So Derek Carr is being pressured 0.4% less than Justin Herbert, according to those numbers. Kirk Cousins, now sucks that he went down. Obviously, I hate that for him. Feel how you will about Kirk Cousins as a player. I think he's a pretty solid, cool dude. Here's his pressure rate this year, 25.1%. Woof. I didn't realize it was that bad. Yikes. Wow. 25%? Wow. Okay. Okay, that's pretty significant. That was pretty significant. That, I guess that explains some things. I think that explains some things. Whew, get better, Kirk Cousins. My goodness. Let's look at the Dolphins and Tua. Obviously, the Dolphins have got the left tackle, Teron Armstead. So shout out to Teron. They are 6-2. So you got to be enjoying being a fan. Yeah, 13%. So 2%, actually almost 3 full percent less than what Derek Carr is. So I would say that Kirk Cousins clears at the top of the end of the spectrum. And then you've got the Derek Carr who's somewhere in the middle. And then the really good offensive lines are probably somewhere around Tua. And just for curiosity's sake, I'm going to look up the Philadelphia Eagles, because obviously Jalen Hurts, and they're known for having great offensive line play. Let's see what Jalen Hurts' pressure rate is. Now, with him being a little bit more mobile, that could adjust it. But, yeah, his is 20%. But I'd also probably argue that with him being a little bit more mobile, that could contribute to some of his pressure rates being higher. Again, all pressure rates are subjective to the person doing the grading. But probably, you know what, honestly, I'm curious now. I'm going to look up Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers, who also have had a really good offensive line so far this year. Let's see what the Buccaneers have allowed Baker. Yeah, Baker's at 18%. So, just right over Derek Carr, but under guys like Kirk Cousins and Tua. So anyway, all this, I'll do one more just for the sake of, us learning this together here on the podcast. Brock Purdy with the San Francisco 49ers is definitely more of a pocket guy, 21%. So I would actually use this as an argument to say that the offensive line for the New Orleans Saints, even though they've been patchwork, have definitely gotten better. And that's key, because we remember in the very beginning, we tracked, remember, week 1 was over 40% of Derek Carr's dropbacks were pressured. So they're definitely moving in a much better direction if he's down into around that 16% mark. So good on the New Orleans Saints for that, even with their patchwork offensive line. So, yeah, that's pretty good. Hopefully that continues. Now, Billy Ocean says, listen, as you all know, I've had a lot of Honor Speed hate, but playing it, he ain't look half bad, nowhere near inconsistent as at guard. Again, Billy, I feel like you're trying to cover your tracks, because he wasn't inconsistent at guard either. He wasn't, except for his first 3 years in the league. But I appreciate you at least giving half of an acknowledgement to Honors P. I love the community here. Like, you can tell what people are from Louisiana, because that petty just won't leave. Like, I'm going to give him his flowers, but one of them going to be wilted. But one of them flowers is going to be from last month. Like, I got it at Brookshire's, and nope, you getting this old flower. You get this hand-me-down flower. But I appreciate that you at least made an attempt. I really do respect it. So in terms of this team, I'm very happy with how they're progressing. I'm not convinced that they're going to be a team that runs the gauntlet or anything. I've already seen Saints fans out there and Saints fan accounts, I'm not judging them, who are talking about how they could easily win 5 straight games over their next run. And I'm like, makes me do that whole teeth suck in thing. But just to remind you, got the Chicago Bears, who will be without Justin Fields. Their backup quarterback is playing. You got the Minnesota Vikings, who just lost Kirk Cousins. Then you've got the Atlanta Falcons, who technically kind of benched Ritter. I mean, he had concussion protocol, but he passed, but they didn't put it back out there. Then you got the Detroit Lions. I do think the next 3 games are very, very winnable. The Detroit Lions game, I don't know about that one. But you got Bears, Vikings, Falcons, which all should be backup quarterbacks. Maybe the starter for Atlanta and Ritter plays, but they have not had consistency there. Then you got the Lions at home. Then you got Carolina, Giants, Rams, Bucks, and then Atlanta again. So, I mean, there are winnable games, but I think the only issue I have with that argument about the whole winnable games thing is, well, the schedule's always been a winnable schedule. Like, the schedule was never the question. Like, the schedule was never that went like, oh, it starts off hard and then it gets crazy. The schedule was always pretty favorable. It's, can the coaching and can the players be good enough to actually succeed and make that happen, right? Like, can they actually take advantage of it? Can Dennis Allen continue to have a top 5 defense? Can Pete Carmichael come around and play calling and make things happen? As TJ says, the Texans game was definitely winnable. Absolutely. The Texans game was winnable. And the Jacksonville Jaguars, hell, I felt like they played their best game of the season against Jacksonville. They just couldn't win against Jacksonville. And then they followed it up by beating a team that they should have beaten. Like, they should have beaten Indianapolis because they are better than Indy. So maybe we have a positive trend here over the past couple weeks, but it's still one of those things where grains of salt are warranted. Absolutely, grains of salt are warranted. And we'll see how it ends up going. We'll take it slowly, take it day by day. Now, too says Goff is a good quarterback, and I agree with that. I think Goff is a good quarterback. I think with good coaching, Goff is the same thing that I think he's always been. Here's my opinion on Goff. Now, I know we're looking way too far ahead, but we're kind of at the halfway point in the season. I think it's okay to kind of take a moment to look around at where you're at and where you're going, right? The halfway point is probably a fair point to do that. I think Jared Goff is exactly like Derek Carr. Now, anybody who's been watching Derek Carr this year as a Saints fan is probably going to get mad at me as saying that. But here's what I mean by that. You have elite quarterbacks, you have bad quarterbacks, and then you have about 20 quarterbacks who are what I would call mid-tier. So when I say 20 quarterbacks, what I'm basically saying is there are 6 at best elite quarterbacks in the league. There are 6 at best like trash, like they're just bad quarterbacks in the league. And then you got everybody else. And everybody else can either be really good or really bad. And a lot of times it depends on coaching more than the quarterback themselves, right? I think Goff is one of those type of guys. Goff went from McVay, did well with McVay, and now he's doing well in Detroit. And I think coaching elevates Jared Goff. I love what Ben Johnson is doing there with Goff. I think they are taking advantage of what he is as a quarterback, and he's playing very efficient, but not spectacular ball, right? Like, Jared Goff has not thrown 30 touchdowns since like 2018 with Sean McVay, but he's still playing well and made the Pro Bowl last year. Good coaching can elevate a mid-tier player. That's Derek Carr's problem because he's a mid-tier player. And remember, if good coaching can elevate you, then bad coaching can lower you. Now, against the Colts, they had good coaching. Like, credit to Pete Carmichael. You had good coaching in 2023 for at least that one game. That was a very well called out game throughout the entire one. I don't have many complaints about it. Every now and then you're going to hear me gripe about, mesh concepts that have overlapping things. And yeah, those are all true still. But generally speaking, you had a very good game by Pete Carmichael as a play caller. And good play calling, shockingly, led to your quarterback finally doing what you wanted. Saints fans have wanted very consistently. What have you wanted, Saints fans? You've wanted 300 yards and 3 TDs. Well, you didn't get quite the 3 TDs. You got 2. But are you really going to gripe too much about them? No, you're not. You're pretty happy with it, right? So good coaching elevates Derek Carr to the level you want him to be, and that's kind of what you have in a Jared Goff. And that is why I hope things continue to get better here in New Orleans. We'll see. But that's how I see a lot of players in the league, man, especially at the quarterback position. There truly is not much of a difference between a Jared Goff, a Derek Carr. You can insert just about anybody you want to into this conversation, even a Baker Mayfield. There's not a ton of difference between those guys. It comes down to how good the coaching is that elevates them to another level. Like even Russell Wilson at this point in his career is part of that 20, right? Kirk Cousins is part of that 20. The 20 group of mid-tier. And I know that maybe in your head you think mid-tier shouldn't include such a big number, but that's just how it is. Like it's we call it a bell curve or whatever, where you got small number at the high end, small number at the low end, and most people are in the middle. And that's where a lot of these guys are. And the coaching takes them to that next level. And then you'll have players that maybe the player's good enough to elevate you. Like Alvin Kamara at his best can elevate a good quarterback. But I don't know if Alvin Kamara is doing it at 28, but he's still really good. So we'll see how you get into the Chicago game. If I'm the Saints, I'm very encouraged, but you got to keep it going too. And it's the same thing that I said following the win against New England. Like New England was a bad team. Like I wasn't very hype about beating New England because New England's they're bad. They're completely trash. They are what they are this year. I don't see the Colts as the same thing. I think the Colts are a not good team, but they're not a bad team, right? I think the Colts probably end up having 6-7 wins on the season. And that's nothing great, but it's kind of like the Saints of last year, right? There's not too much of a difference. So I look at that and go, okay, this win maybe gives me a little bit more hope because of why they won. You beat the Patriots because the Patriots suck, right? You beat the Colts because you did things that winners needed to do. I don't think there's a big difference there. Tragic says, do you think the caller or the play caller may have changed, but not publicly be announced? I don't think that's happened, Tragic. I don't. Could that be possible? Sure, but I doubt it. Now, they could have made some change that we're not aware of, but I know that Ronald Curry and Pete Carmichael were both on the sidelines against the Colts. So I don't think anything has changed. 9-2 says, I think Goff is better watching some Lions games. He makes more throws than everyone you mentioned. Again, a lot of the throws that you're talking about being made, almost every quarterback can make. It's very rare to be special. Like when I say special, go look at what somebody like Patrick Mahomes can do. I mean, that top 6 is truly a unique level. Derek Carr can make every throw that Jared Goff can. And I'm not trying to say that to insult Jared Goff. Far from it. Again, I've always thought that Goff was a solid, good quarterback. But here's Jared Goff's career numbers with 2 very good play callers, Sean McVay and Ben Johnson. His career numbers, 64.5% completion percentage, 165 TDs to 75 interceptions, and a quarterback rating of 93. Right? That's with 2 very good play callers. What's Derek Carr's? Same thing. Derek Carr's career, 64.6% completion percentage, 225 TDs to 103. If you're talking about the TD percentages to interception percentages, they're literally identical. And quarterback rating of 92. I mean, coaching makes such an impact on this. And I'm not saying that Goff is bad. I'm simply saying that when you talk about mid-tier, that's how powerful coaching is, because Derek Carr can do everything that Jared Goff can and vice versa. But if you put either one of them on the bad team, they're going to look bad. And this year has really really reminded me how important coaching is at the NFL level, where we almost understate it. We talk about all these star players. We talk about, the impact of the Michael Thomases, or let's just get out of New Orleans, Devontae Adams. We talk about the amazing power of a Derrick Henry at running back and Saquon Barkley's and all these things. But a lot of those teams don't win football games unless the coaching's there. They just don't. DeAndre Hopkins, for a good 10 years, has had a legitimate argument being the best receiver in the NFL. And that man has not even sniffed a bowl. Not even sniffed it. I mean, he could have sniffed it. Hopefully he passes all of his drug tests. But you get what I'm saying. Right? Garrett says, I think Kirk is a bit better than him. I don't. I've never seen anything from Kirk Cousins that makes me think that he's better. Does that mean I think he's bad? No. But Kirk Cousins never, in any tape I've ever watched of Kirk Cousins, I've got to watch a lot of Kirk Cousins, never has Kirk Cousins ever shown me something that makes me go, he's in the top 6, that elite category. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm saying he's not a top 10 quarterback. But the argument I'm trying to really get across is the gap between 10 and 16 is a much smaller gap than 1 and 10. Like the 1 and 10 gap is about that wide, and the 10 to 16 gap is about this wide. So even if we want to say Derek Carr is number 18 and Kirk Cousins is number 10, there is a shorter distance between those two than those two and their distance between the Mahomes of the league. And all of this to say is just you need the people to stand up that are going to be good, or the superstars you do have, and play calling. That's what you got to do to get to that level, right? And some of this is kind of theory, right? Because it's hard to prove some of what I'm saying, because it's not like I can just take a Kyle Shanahan and give him to Derek Carr and you watch Derek Carr suddenly explode. But I will say that just about anybody that Kyle Shanahan's had at quarterback, he's made explode. And if they weren't good, he got rid of them really, really quick. So, that's just kind of where I think the Saints are at too. And it's important to kind of note that, because if you do expect New Orleans to get better, it still has to come from coaching. So to convince me that this team is better, they have to beat the Bears, but they have to beat the Bears the way they beat the Colts. And one thing that I threw into today's film study, I don't know if y'all noticed, but the Saints players were very, very adamant how much of an impact Derek Carr had in this win. Derek Carr apparently just knew Gus Bradley's tells and gave several of them away, and the New Orleans Saints were able to strategize and take advantage of that. Okay, that's great. Good veteran quarterback does that. But I need to see the Saints win against the Bears and the Vikings the same way they won against the Colts. They won against the Colts because they were a better team. They were aggressive. They dictated what that Colts defense was going to do. They predicted it, and they demolished it. They beat the Patriots because the Patriots are just the bottom of the league, and the Patriots are probably going to pick top 5. They beat the Colts because they legitimately beat the Colts. Those are the two differences to me when I watch those games and I watch the film and I look at things. So we'll see what it looks like moving forward because guess what? Derek Carr is not going to play former defensive coordinators every week. So how much of that information pushed them over the edge? And can Pete Carmichael and Ronald Curry do it without that? Right? We'll see. Again, the Bears arguably are in the same conversation of the New England Patriots. Arguably. If you lose that game, whoo, dog, and it's at home, better not losing the home. But if you can move and beat the 2-6 Bears, who you should be universally, kind of chosen to beat. Like if anybody picks the Bears to win this game, they're just haters. But I will say that there's a certain wide receiver in Chicago who I fear more than just about anybody else that's ever played against the Saints at wide receiver. DJ Moore. Hate that man. I mean, I respect him, but gosh dang it, I hate that man. So, oh, you better not let him get to you. You better not let him get to you. But other than that, yeah, you should beat the Bears just like you beat the Patriots because you're a better team. If you don't leave 5-4 this weekend, I'm really going to struggle to believe in you. But you have a game here that you can win. And I think the offense showed something this week that they haven't shown all season. The only thing is you got to repeat that showing. You got to show that it wasn't just a one-off. You got to prove that it wasn't just the fact that Derek Carr knew some of the calls so he could take advantage of it. And I love that he did that. You just got to see more. Dupree says, I heard something a week or so ago about 30 players not even opening their tablets to look at film all week. Is that true? If so, there's the problem. I don't know about that, nor do I know about that in context. Because I'll say this. There are weeks where if something just goes so bad, you don't review last week's film. You don't. Maybe you had terrible habits. Maybe you had something that you just shouldn't have done. Maybe the game was just so bad, you need to focus on what you can do well and copy those things. Context can get lost, and that could be a real thing, but there was a legitimate reason why it didn't happen. I don't know if that happened or not. But I can say that I understand why at face value that sounds terrible. But let's take, for example, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers loss. What can you really learn from getting curb stomped by Tampa and Baker Mayfield? Sincerely, what can you learn from that game? Now, I'm not saying that watching film isn't valuable. It is valuable. But there are some times where you need to focus on something different. And sometimes that means watching film of something else. What I mean by that is, sure, you can watch your own film and you do want to self-evaluate, but sometimes it's more important to just look at the next topic and say, okay, you effed up over here, but here's what you need to do right there. See this? See how it worked with this team and how we need to do that this week. And I just threw the Tampa one out as an example. We don't have to use the Tampa one. We can pick a game. But the point I'm making is it depends on the context of why that was said. And context is really important for me. I also struggled to believe 30 players didn't watch tape. I really do. Because I know how the New Orleans facility is. And they are very much a tape-centric. If there's anything they don't do enough of is analytics. They don't ignore tape. So I really struggle to believe that happened. And it's so out of context. I don't know. But I guess I can't really add anything to it, right? Billy says, you never throw out tape of a loss? No, I disagree. You absolutely do. And a lot of Hall of Fame coaches have said you just throw some of that away. A lot of them have said that. Sometimes it's just so bad, you skip it. Like you just say, look, we all did worse than we should. Let's get back, start, reset, get back to it. I mean, I've had too many people tell me that, yeah, there's sometimes you throw that away. I do agree that generally speaking, that shouldn't happen. But I can understand that there are situations that every now and then, okay, I get it, whatever. As long as you're always getting better. And the key is the offense has gotten better for 3 weeks, even if the past 3 weeks haven't all resulted in wins. Hopefully we can put together a 3-game win streak before facing the Detroit Lions. Hopefully. And again, I'm not trying to speak that it's going to happen. But I will say you're going against Tyson Baguette. I'm going to call him Baguette. Why? Because, well, I want to. This is a guy who turns the ball over. Now, he doesn't get sacked a lot, and that's going to be a challenge for New Orleans because if they start letting him get the ball out and getting the ball out to DJ Moore, that could be something to pay attention to. But this is a you ain't got much on him. He's a rookie quarterback. I mean, he's 23 years old. If you want to talk about what he did in college, he was at Shepherd. I mean, what do you want me to say about that? Not exactly playing in the SEC. Yeah, I'm giving a nod to all you SEC lovers out there. So this is a quarterback you should, man, I'm going to be a depressed podcaster if we lose this game, but we'll see what happens. Not too good to see. What do you think Rashid's yards and catches, and I actually hated Steve Smith more than anyone that we played, maybe besides Deion Sanders. All right, so that's two different things. I love Steve Smith, hated playing him, but absolutely love him. And what do you think of Rashid's yards and catches? So 992, can you follow up on that? What do you mean? What do I think of him? Because I did a film study on it today. If you haven't checked it out, Saints Film Room, check it out. I did a film study on Rashid Shaheed's catches. Are you asking, like, do I want them to expand his route tree? Do I think that is there something he can improve on? Just to kind of expand on your question, and I'll gladly, or expound on your question, and I will gladly answer it. If you're looking for a film study on him against the Colts, I put one out today a few hours ago. So if you missed that one, go peep it. And also, thank you for supporting the channel. For those who are listening, look, I can't do what I do without people like 992. If you want to support the channel, there's two specific ways you can do it. Number one, you can tip through PayPal, Venmo, Cash App. And I'll tell you right now, if you tip $2, I'm going to be hella appreciated, right? Everybody tip $2 for Jameis Winston, who didn't get traded. Love that we still got Jameis on the squad. Or check out the website, revdeuce.com, rock the merch. I'm actually repping the Who Dat Confessional t-shirt right now. I know TJ has our Pull the Trigger t-shirts. If you want to support the channel, appreciate you. 992, look forward to your follow-up there. So Garrett says, I think Rashid could be the next Tyreek Hill with development. He is the only receiver that is consistently running faster than him is Tyreek Hill. So, I mean, that says something, right? But that has to say something. Now, I'm not ready to label the man Tyreek Hill, but gosh dang it. Gosh dang it. It's looked pretty. It's enjoyable as heck to see this man go at it right now. Absolutely loving it. I really am. I'm absolutely loving it. Hopefully he continues to grow as a player. Against the Bears, you'd like to see more catches. I do think that they could use him more. Now, here's something about Rashid Shaheed that I'd like to see him develop as. He's not a great blocker, which means they don't have him on the field for as many plays. When he's on the field, it is kind of obvious that he's going to be running routes. Now, just in terms of like him becoming less one-dimensional, like if he wants to get his snap counts up, because here's the thing about Rashid Shaheed. I'm not saying this in a negative because I'm going to give you his career numbers, but Rashid Shaheed is only seeing 58% of the offensive snaps right now. That's it. Now, context, that is 17% higher than last year. So he is seeing more than last year, but he still has not developed into a complete receiver. What you have seen him is develop. So let me be very clear. I am not saying that Rashid Shaheed is like secretly not good. What I am saying is that he has not reached his potential yet, and they are working towards that. His comeback routes, his crossing patterns, some of the depth in his intermediate routes, he's got to get better at. Now, there are some things that he has mastered. What has he mastered? Watch today's Saints Film Room. He's definitely mastered the skinny post, the post route, the go route. Yes, the skinny post and the post route are two different things. He's added a dyno stem, but if you watch the video from today, that dyno stem is not super clean. So he is actually doing a fantastic job. To give him even more credit, look at his actual stat lines. He is leading the league in yards per reception right now. The entire league. He is averaging 20.8 yards per reception. Absolutely fantastic. In fact, in 9 more yards, if he gets 9 more yards, like if he literally just catches one pass, 9 yards against the Bears, he will have as many yards as he did all of last year. And he's already got more touchdowns. So Rashid Shaheed is definitely growing as a player. But there are definitely a lot of things that he can do to get better so that he could be a more consistent contributor to this offense. And I think he's on that pace. I mean, he's actually on pace right now. I'll give you the math on it just because why not? We'll calculate. It's actually pretty easy to calculate. Assuming he plays all 17 games, he's currently getting 59.9 yards per game. multiply that by 17. He is on pace for 1,018 yards. He's on pace for 6 touchdowns. 1,018 yards and 6 touchdowns is what he's on pace for if he completes the season. We just got to see him continue to get better. And I hope he stays healthy because he's looking fantastic. Walkthrough says, Thomas hasn't touched 10 targets this season. Would you like to see him more involved? He's one of the guys in the league who's open when he's not open. Just have to get him back in rhythm. There's a yes and a no there for me on Michael Thomas. On one side of the coin, and I've been very adamant about this, Michael Thomas is doing better than I expected him to do this year. Michael Thomas is actually on pace for right at 1,000 yards as well. Since we want to do some calculations, and we're going to call out TJ because he's the known Michael Thomas hater. Michael Thomas is averaging 54.9 yards per game. Multiply that by 17. He's at 933 is what he's on pace for. That's pretty damn good. Like, that's better than I expected. I expected him to be around the 750 mark. So shout out to him for doing that. But at the same time, his hands are not as crispy as they used to be. It reminds me of late-time Marcus Colston. Marcus Colston was obviously a New Orleans great, but if you remember the end of Marcus Colston, the hands were what started to go. Now, I'm not saying Michael Thomas has lost his hands. He's still catching 62% of his passes, which is good. But Michael Thomas used to be the guy that caught 85% of his passes. Like, that's who he was. So, do I think that Michael Thomas should get targets? Yes, but I think it should be like with a grain of salt. I don't want to force feed him the ball because I don't think he's that guy anymore. But I do think that there are opportunities to get him the ball that they need to take that they haven't all season long. Now, they started to do that this week against the Colts. I loved when they hit him over the middle of the field in a deep crossing pattern that went for about 20 yards. That was vintage Michael Thomas, and that I want to see more of. But I don't want to just start throwing him fade routes 5 yards at the goal line into the corner of the end zone because, no offense, Michael Thomas, I don't believe you're that dude anymore. Like, I don't believe that Michael Thomas is going to one-on-one body out most corners and just go up and nab a ball 8 feet in the air. That doesn't mean he's not effective, though. I just think that there are some opportunities that you could use him in, but don't expect him to be 2019 anymore. And little things like, for example, in the Colts game, there was a slant pass that was behind Michael Thomas, and it went through his hands. Now, whose fault is that? Oh, it's Derek Carr. Derek Carr threw the ball behind him. But we all know who've watched Michael Thomas for 7 years, it didn't matter if Drew Brees hit him behind him on a slant route. He caught it. So that's kind of the difference between then Michael Thomas and now. That Michael Thomas would have taken a bad ball and still caught it. This Michael Thomas needs things to be a little bit better for him, and then he'll catch it. And that's just a slight difference. He's still a good player, but that's the difference between being all-pro, arguably best receiver in the NFL, and then just being a good player. And I think right now he's just a good player. But I do agree from the original premise, sorry to get on a tangent, that they do need to get him the ball more because there are just some things that he can do really well, like move the change. Dupree says, in the film, did you notice a significant drop in Kamara running little swing routes and more design routes take advantage of mismatches? Yes and no. They do still use Kamara a lot in the whole, just swing it on out. But one thing you saw more of in the Colts is Kamara purposely lining up as a wide receiver. We saw him be used in the Texas concept, finally, that led to his touchdown. That was fantastic to see him using that. And you did see him run a couple option routes. So they have added some of those things that used to be his plays, and I think he's actually the reason for that. I give a lot of props to Alvin Kamara this year because where I feel like he's actually developed the most is as a leader. And he talked about a couple of weeks ago after the loss of the Texans, I believe it was after the loss of the Texans, the need for them to get the plays that they like, as in plays that he likes, plays that the offensive line likes, plays that Derek Carr likes, and start running those. And the players needed more influence in what the game was actually doing. And I think some of that is actually starting to get shown in the games in the past 3 weeks. Will that continue? Gosh, I hope so. There's still some plays that I go, what did I complain about a few days ago? Remember before the game, I complained about how they weren't using Jamal Williams, at all. They finally used Jamal Williams in ways that Jamal Williams should have been used. Congratulations. You used him in third and short. So you used him in the red zone. Thank God you figured out what he was good at because he was so good at it last year. Tony, good to see you. Who dat? So there are definitely improvements being made, right? And as long as that continues, you should be happy and confident as a Saints fan. We'll see if it continues. He says, Deuce, you have the percentages on if they're running more duo or outside zone. I'm seeing a lot or a ton of duo and gap. They are still running predominantly outside zone. I will remind you, though, that you can have a zone run that can look like duo depending on the alignment of defensive linemen. Remember that the easy tell for zone, whether it's inside zone or outside zone, does everybody pivot and move one direction same time? So duo, you're simply going to see SS, same foot, same shoulder. So FSSH. You're going to see that happen pretty often, which is going to look like a triangle hitting a point. So you can end up with a zone block that is essentially a double team, because one of the things that most offensive line coaches are going to teach you is handle the first level first. So even in a zone run, if you're supposed to get to the second level, you don't just let the guy behind you crash through. And there's a plethora of reasons what could happen. In general, they are playing more zone, but they also do man concepts. I don't have any percentages to give you, but just from me actually going through the games, they are running more zone. But I will say that when they run like QB power, that's not zone. Like when they get Taysom Hill out there, they're running power. You know, they're doing man on man, and depending on which way they decide to go, it could be very different. But generally, when Taysom's in, the options that they run, those option runs are generally not going to be zone blocking. They're going to be power blocking. So we just kind of have to go play by play. One thing is good. Yeah. So we'll see how it is. Will go. Olave's in his own head. I do agree that he is, and I hope that he pops out of it. So I hope that he pops out of it. Do get into the second level of the quickness. I've got to say that not only does Cesar Ruiz seem to get to the second level pretty well this season, but he also looks bigger. Like maybe it's just a perception thing, but it feels like I look at him on tape and he looks 30 pounds heavier than he was when he came into the league, but he also moves better. So I would still say that there's some plays Cesar Ruiz is losing he shouldn't be, but I think he does look generally better. Joe says, I just hope Carr gets in a rhythm and we can get momentum before going into the bye. One thing I do love about this Saints team is week 11 bye. Love that, man. So you got the Bears and then the Vikings. Then you get a bye week and go to Atlanta. The next 4 weeks, hopefully, are very good for New Orleans. Now, we'll see what happens, but it is not unreasonable to think that you're 7-4 facing the Lions. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen because they should be better than 4-4 now, and they're not. But this is a good little run they've got ready, and I really hope that they come out with a vengeance against Atlanta in the bye week. Now, Atlanta's bye week is, I think, also week 11. So you're going to have an Atlanta team that's probably a little bit healthy. So keep that in mind. But they both are going to come off that bye week in week 11 and then play in Atlanta. But I do think that the New Orleans Saints are the better team. And I love a week 11 bye week. I really, really do love a week 11 bye week. So we still have that crazy stat where Taysom gets at least 7 carries. We're 17-1. Yeah, I mean, and I would also just real quickly say that I love that stat, but it's also a correlation, causation, kind of logical fallacy. Because if you ran the ball 7 straight times, like in the first 2 drives, that doesn't guarantee you're going to win if those were Taysom Hill, right? How I interpret that stat, it's more indicative of proper usage of Hill, as in he is a good balanced part of the offense. You know, because by itself, the stat doesn't say anything. You know, if you just run 7 times with Taysom Hill, that does not guarantee a win. But what it can tell you is you're probably using him in a better situational setting than he's been used when he's only getting 4 carries or 3 carries. So it's all kind of, context again, kind of the word of the day, context. But we'll see. We'll see. Never played on the left side, and now the left side looks great. Pete is reminding you of a lot of Armstead. I wouldn't go that far, but Pete has definitely he did a very admirable job against the Colts. I really give him his credit on that one. And I did a whole post on, let's see, I'll actually try to put that one on the screen. I did a whole post on Twitter where I put some of the clips out there so that y'all could see some of the clips. I'll go ahead and put that here on the screen for those who like to watch here on the YouTube channel live. We do the podcast, obviously, in multiple formats. For those who want to watch it live, there you go. Some Andres Pete reps while we talk and while I read some of the last chat before we get ready to wrap up. I think we ended up I put like 7 or 8, maybe 9 reps into that one. And just Andres Pete looked good, right? I think Andres Pete had a really good week for him. Don't go crazy and start listing him as the left tackle of the future, but give him his flowers. I think he did pretty well. And again, you can kind of watch some of those reps here. My favorite rep of Andres Pete is actually the last rep in this reel, and it's on the Alvin Kamara touchdown pass. He's using the snatch and trap technique, completely collapses the arms of the pass rusher, gets him down on the ground. You see Alvin Kamara right up the gut, scoring, and that just makes me so happy. It's actually right there. So really some good tape. If you want to see that, I've put out some, and I'm going to put out more. I also put out some on Paulson Adebo. If you don't follow me on Twitter, I encourage you to go do that. That way you can check out some of those, because we don't put everything on YouTube. I try to give a little bit of a mix of where we put out the content so that everybody has an opportunity to, enjoy it, I guess, and learn from it. Because my goal is to edify, and I also want to learn too. I watch a lot of channels. Like we were going through this past week, and everybody was flaming Derek Carr and talking about how trash he was. I watched the not Dan Orlovsky, though Dan Orlovsky does have opinions. I watched the Kurt Warner take on him. I watched the Chase Daniels film study that Chase did. I watched JT O'Sullivan, and it's always important to learn and what can they do better in these situations, and I love it. So hopefully y'all do too. Hopefully y'all do as well. Best game from the O-line by far. And even then, that's a grain of salt, because since we talked about analytics, ESPN has a pass protection win rate tracker, and the New Orleans Saints offensive line is the third worst in the NFL at pass rush win rate. So they do got to get better, but I would agree it was better this week. Tony says, has Penny been benched? He was. Dennis Allen says that he's been benched with the hopes that he has not learned, he doesn't want his confidence to diminish, and he wants him to continue to grow in practice before putting him back out there. That's what DA has said. But he's currently benched. So he comes in as like the 6th offensive lineman. So he does play. He's just not starting right now. And their hope is that they give him time to continue development off the field instead of throwing him into the fire like they did this year, and that he will get better. If you're curious about his snap counts, like how much he's actually seeing right now, he saw over the past 2 weeks, he's seen 9 snaps, right? So he was a starter up until week 5. He got benched in week 6 because of injury. He had to come in and play in week 6, and then he's been the 6th offensive lineman the past 2 games. And Dennis Allen says because they hope that they can make sure that his confidence doesn't take a hit while they're trying to teach him the technique he needs to be the left tackle. So where can you get the hat? This one I actually got for Christmas. I don't remember where I got this one. I do have a nice hat on my website, though, Joseph, just say. Whew. Who dat, y'all? I love y'all, but it's right at an hour. We got to wrap it up. I love y'all. I will see y'all Thursday, right back here, right back, same time. Who dat? God bless. Check out the film study today if you have not already. Check it out. Saints Film Room, we covered what, in my opinion, was Rashid Shaheed's best game of the season. Hopefully y'all enjoy it. I will be in Discord if you need me, or on Twitter. Who dat? God bless. Catch you on the next one. Thank you so much for y'all's love and support, and we will see you Thursday evening.